Morning all. Good morning everybody. Hiya. We're just about to ask the officer to see we're on. Okay. Good morning everybody. Welcome to Nottinghamshire Pension Fund Committee, and I welcome any members of the public to the meeting, whether here or online. My name is Eric Kerry. I'm the chairman of the committee, and I remind members that the meeting is being broadcast live, and remind members also, please use your microphones when speaking so you can be heard on the broadcast, and switch them off when you finish. Before we begin the meeting, I'd like to remind members of the public that present that placards, banners, advertising materials, similar items are not permitted, and any committee meeting must be covered and removed. Failure to comply may result in members of the public being asked to leave the meeting. Members of the public should remain seated during any debate and not do anything to endanger the health and safety of any person. Members of the public may record proceedings and report all meetings. Any person recording the meeting must not disrupt the good order of the meeting. Please ensure that mobile phones and other electronic devices are switched to silent or turned off. I've just done that myself. Okay, let's move on to today's agenda. For the item number 1, which is minutes of the last meeting held on December the 8th, which I have here, and ask if the committee can agree that the minutes are a true and correct record. Okay, I don't see any other indications. Thank you very much for that. Members, I'll sign them later. Item number 2. Members of the committee are asked to note the replacement of Councillor Chris Barnfather with Councillor Roger Jackson, member of the committee, and of Alan Woodward with Yvonne Davidson as a trade union representative. I can see that Councillor Jackson is here today. Roger, welcome. I hope you will enjoy your future as a member of this committee. It's a very interesting committee, I can assure you, and I hope you enjoy it, and hopefully you'll learn a lot about the stuff we do. Yes, Councillor Henry. Yeah,
I'm replacing Councillor John Clark, who is on other council business.
Okay, we're going to do that with apologies for absence, and I think, is that right, Joe? Yeah, okay. So with that done, item 3 brings us on to apologies for absence and any replacement. So may I ask Joe Toomey to confirm those, please?
Thank you. As indicated by Councillor Henry, he's here to substitute for Councillor Clark for today's meeting. We've also received apologies for absence from Councillor Sally Longford from Nottingham City Council, Councillor Gordon Moore from Rushcliffe Borough Council, Sue Reader, who is the scheduled bodies representative, and Yvonne Davidson, who is the new trade union representative that whose membership you've just noted.
Following that, Councillor Henry, we do welcome you as well, and I hope you enjoy the meeting. Thank you. Okay, declarations of interest by members and officers. Item A on that, number 4A. Do any members or officers present have any disclosable pecuniary interest to declare? I see no indications. B, do any members or officers present have any private interests, either pecuniary or non-pecuniary, to declare? Again, I see no indications. Thank you. So our first substantive item today is item number 5, which is the McLeod update, an extension of project manager role. So before I hand over to Mr. Clues, John, to present the report, I'll move the recommendations which are on page 15 of the agenda pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to second that and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. John, would you like to take us through your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is, obviously, as the Chair said, this is an update report on the McLeod judgment, which is a significant piece of work that the pension fund are required to undertake around recalculating pension benefits for a substantial number of members. The purpose of the report is based on the McLeod and Sargent Court of Appeal ruling that the government put through on in 2015 for pension reforms, and this was around unlawfully treating existing public sector employees differently based on members' age on the 1st of April 2012. In terms of what the fund has been required to do, we're expected to collect data going back to 2012 and review that data. And this really is a significant piece of work of around 45,000 lines of data that we're collecting from around 450 scheme employers. We started that process last year, and the deadline for our rectification of collecting data is the end of March, but it will probably spin over into the next financial year as we start to get data back from scheme employers. We're yet to receive the remedy for the McLeod judgment from the government, and that's not expected till sometime in the autumn, possibly October. We've been informed. Once we have that that information, the fund will then have to begin to start to recalculate members' benefits, and this is a significant piece of work. Hence why, at the time of the project starting, we sought resources for a project manager to help with the management of the project. And following the ongoing work that we have to do, I'm seeking an extension of those resources up till 2025. Oh yeah, funding, sorry, I should have said funding rather than resources. So I'm seeking funding from Pensions Committee for the extension of that post.
Okay, thank you very much, John.
I'm happy to take questions.
Very clear report and concise. Thank you very much for that. We've been doing this obviously for a number of years now. It's a long period piece of work, and we need to ensure that it gets done to its completion. So hopefully the committee will agree to recommendations. Thank you very much. We'll note the report, agrees to extend the funding, and also to get further reports of progress and implementation. So I'd like to open up for any questions or comments, please. Okay, I don't see any hands. Oh, Councillor Henry, yes.
I was just checking. I know you talked about funding, but you didn't say how much you were looking for. Am I missed it?
52,860 per annum. It's on item 30 on the bottom of page 14. Okay.
It's a significant piece of work across the whole of the LGPS, and all funds are actually undertaking this piece of work.
Councillor Introna, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, John, for the report. I note in point 22 that you say that the person will help with other national projects and other items. Would it be fair to say that you've also still got your challenges in terms of vacancies, and will this post help support some of that as well? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I can positively say that we have a number of challenges across the fund and across the LGPS nationally with pension dashboards and various other developments, and so we plan to use the resources wisely. But yes, we are finding it difficult to recruit experienced members of pension funds.
Sarah, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just really wanted to add a little bit to that. We have a monthly account meeting with our systems provider, Civica, and we had one of those meetings yesterday. What we've arranged to do is have a planning session with Civica and our internal team leaders, with a view that under the contract we have a set number of service days each year, and how we can actually gain some additional resource from Civica themselves to manage some of the implementation of some of the other modules that we have under the contract. So things such as monthly returns, identification and verification as we move towards self-service through both employer and member portals. Also looking to the future around how we use other technologies such as chatbots, web chat, etc. There are challenges, as you know, and I have reported in here myself about recruitment, but the other side that I'm very strongly want us to move towards is that digital processing and member self-service as well. So I think with the aid of Civica, we can start to progress forward on some of those additional things that we need to really start to transform the way that we work.
Okay, thank you both. It sounds like this person will be gainfully employed. Thank you.
So thanks for putting it in context that where our transformation into more better ways of working is and important for the accuracy also of the data. So thank you for that. Anybody else wish to?
It's just a clarification, Chair. You know, you talked about the difficulties in getting people to work in this area. If you weren't to get anybody in the time specified, will that affect how we respond to our statutory requirements or not?
Yes, it would. The problem we have is there aren't many people out there with LGPS experience, so we have to use our resources wisely. And we're doing a lot of training at the moment. We recruited about 4 or 5 people in the autumn, and we're training them. But it's a constant, ongoing process. Really, it takes around 1 to 2 years to get somebody really up to date in respect of pension administration because of the complexities of some of the issues that we have to deal with.
The point I was trying to raise is that is having the sort of the emergency thing in place just in case we're not going to get anybody. I know you talk about being creative, but what exactly are you doing to be creative to make sure that if we didn't get anybody in place to do that, we will still be able to meet our statutory requirements? What exactly are we doing? Or will be doing?
We're looking, obviously, as Sarah has said, about using our process and systems to address some of the issues. So our software providers are assisting in that. We are obviously continuing to recruit. We work with other funds as well where we need help, and we've brought in certain support packages when we've required them. So there's a bit of a mix in all that over the period of time.
Okay, that's a wider. We're really talking today specifically about this post and other. There is a lot of work going on in the background to answer the questions that you've just raised. So I'm very happy with what's going on in the department. Thank you. Okay, so I don't see any more comments, questions. Okay, Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Could you just touch on what work we're doing with the other LGPS funds? For example, could we not second a specialist to help us?
Well, everybody's. We can't actually, in terms of from other funds. We meet on a regular basis to talk about best ways of best practice and support each other when there are technical difficulties around some of the regulations and things like that. So we're very much work together where we can, but other funds are in the same position as us, trying to recruit and maintain their staffing.
But suffice to say, as I said a few moments ago, we've been very strategic in terms of our work in recruitment and planning for future needs, and done things like apprenticeships and all of the things to bring people in to get on that ladder. Okay, can I now move to the vote, please? All those in favour of the recommendation that's been proposed and seconded? No. Only county council members of this committee can vote, Councillor Henry. So you can vote. Say that again, because I didn't see you indicate. All those in favour, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Moving on to item number 6, which is the Strategic Asset Allocation Working Party. Before I hand over to Tamsin, who will introduce the report, I'd like to move the recommendations on page 20 of the agenda pack, please.
Second that, Mr. Chairman, and reserve my right to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Introner. Tamsin, you want to take us through the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid I need to start with an apology. William spotted a typo in the range for inflation in table 2. It should be 18 to 35%, which is unchanged from last year, but it says 18 to 30. So my apologies for that. Members are aware of the well-attended working party in January to discuss the investment strategy. This meeting gave members the opportunity to discuss the investment strategy of the pension fund in detail, and as a result of this, the following recommendations are made to committee. Number 1, amend the wording of the fund's investment beliefs to those shown in Appendix C. Reflect the new wording in the investment strategy statement at its next review. 2, include index-linked gilts as an investment option within the inflation allocation currently met by the Aegon Sustainable Diversified Growth Fund. 3, rename the current gilts mandate government bonds. Consider the extension of the universe to include overseas government bonds. And 4, formalise the strategic asset allocation credit category subclass allocations as shown in Table 1. The Working Party also received a presentation from John Clues, pension manager, setting out some of the issues in the ongoing reconciliation of GMP data, pending a future report to committee. And climate risk training was provided by LGPS Central. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tamsin. Very important afternoon's work, very interesting work, but also we had a lot of debate, discussion in terms of bringing it forward. So thank you very much for bringing that together concisely and making those important changes. I'd like to open up for any questions or comments, please. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment on Appendix C, responsible investment beliefs. I'd just like to say how I think they were extremely well written. I think they're very clear, and I think it gives I mean, we've had lots of discussion. I won't say we've wasted a lot of time on it, we've spent a lot of time on it, and I think this is a very good synopsis of where we are and where we should be. Right, so congratulations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman Graham, for those words of thanks. We do appreciate the very hard work to get us this way. Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to say the Working Party group was really constructive. There were some very good discussions and debates, looking at the allocation and the ranges of equities, property and fixed income. It seems sensible, assuming we don't go into a recession. There's some optimism and a light at the end of the tunnel. Looking at page, where is it? I think it's page 4 of the report. No, it isn't. I'm telling it. Just let me get the page. Sorry, Chairman. Yes, sorry. Page 1 of the report. On the first point, and it's the second point of the first point, where it says include index-linked gilts as an investment option with inflation allocation currently met by the Aegon Sustainable Diversified Growth Fund. That isn't something I feel I could actually support, but I understand the rationale for it and getting some inflation-linked gilts in there, but I do like that sustainable fund. I know the performance of it hasn't been where we would like it to have been. In addition, I've got some concerns over the wording still in Appendix C. I know we had a constructive conversation about this, but on page 26 of the yellows, we still have on the third bullet point a strategy of engagement rather than exclusion is more compatible with fiduciary duties. That is something, as you're aware, that I disagree with. Then bullet point number 5, I still think that wording is very dubious. Where it's saying there is a risk, but also financial opportunity in holding and influencing companies that have weak governance of financially material ESG issues, but potential to improve. That to me is a wishy-washy statement of we can hold anything regardless. So that's why I can't actually vote for this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Waters. You did make those points well in the meeting. Obviously, we've got to try and put all views together, and that's why you may feel it's wishy-washy. I think what we have to do is try and get those views into something that we can support. And I feel a bit disappointed you can't support us overall with it, because it's not strategically putting you in a position, I don't think, that contravenes your beliefs. But would anybody like to come back on that? Tamsin, any comments on the index gilts comment?
Yeah, I'm just on indexing gilts. I think that, we've not held them for the last 10, 15 years, simply because the return on them was so low. It was actually a -3%. So the cost of buying them and getting the inflation protection was just too high. That has changed massively over the last 6 months. So they're now actually got a positive yield of 0.7%. And why I think they should definitely be in the universe is because they provide the best possible protection against inflation, and really importantly, there is no cap to it. So if inflation went to 20%, they would still provide protection against inflation, and that is not true of the Aegon DGF fund. So, I think the Aegon DGF fund will provide protection against inflation while inflation is in the kind of 0 to 4% range. But as we've seen over the last few months, they really struggle when it's higher than that. It's also, they involve, because they invest in a whole range of assets, they involve a lot more risk than inflation-linked gilts, and that's why I think it is right that they're in the universe. And when the time comes that they yield enough, I'm not sure it's today, but enough, that's when we should probably switch the DGF fund over to them.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, please? If not, I'll move to the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendations, please indicate. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? That's one abstention. It's carried. Thank you very much, members. Okay, moving on to item number 7, which is the Pension Fund Treasury Management Strategy Statement for 23-24. I'll introduce the report. Before doing so, sorry, Kieran will introduce the report. Before doing so, I'll move the recommendation on page 37 of the agenda pack.
Thank you. I'd like to second that, please, Mr. Chairman.
Kieran, would you like to take us through your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This is the forward-looking strategy for 23-24 relating to pension fund liquidity and cash balances. This is a report that comes to the pension fund every year. It's no different than the one last year. The principal practices rather that we apply to our daily treasury management activity remain the same in terms of risk management, as outlined in the report. The risk management is the most significant practice, the one that is kind of drives all our systems and controls. And if anybody has any questions about it, I'm happy to answer them. There's no actual rate of return data in any of this, because there's 2 other committee reports that come to Pension Fund Committee, one halfway through the year giving the mid-year performance, and one after the year has closed, and that will be the next one that the Pension Fund Committee receives at some point after the end of March. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Kieran. So this is the strategy, not the performance report of how the Treasury Department have functioned during the year. I'll open it up to any questions or comments, please. I'm looking around. I don't see any, so let's. Sorry, Councillor Jackson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Jackson. I've nearly stopped giving you a chance to speak for the first time at committee.
Thank you,
I
Chairman.
do
Yeah.
apologise.
And saying just being new to this committee and not really sure what the strategy is going forward in our investments, I just wondered how we did it on a long-term basis or how we reacted to the markets, going forward if the markets fluctuate and change. What is our strategy going forward? Is it long-term investment for return, or do we have a portfolio there where we react to market changes and this, that, and the other going forward?
Okay.
Shall I take that initially and then pass over to you? The overall strategy, which we've just been talking about, is very much long term. I mean, as you'll be aware, this fund has dependents who might be alive in 100 years' time. So it's very much long term. I think when you go back to Treasury, then it's a slightly different story. And I'll hand over to Kieran to talk about that.
The strategy in this report only covers, if you like, the cash balances that exist between the pension fund investments relating to day-to-day liquidity. So there's no real drive to get high returns on those, although high returns are better than lower returns, other things being equal. So we basically have money market funds and a few bank accounts where we deposit cash that pension fund happens to have at the end of the working day that we can call back either immediately or on an instant access basis, or sometimes we make 3-month deposits with banks or we can do it with other public sector local authorities on pension funds, just to maintain a healthy liquidity position. The strategy outlines the kind of minimum lending criteria that we apply to these deposits, so we don't lend to anyone who fails to meet those, and we try and get the highest return within that restriction. But it's not really long term like the pension fund is. It's only long term to ensure that looking forward for the foreseeable future, we don't see any point at which we won't have any cash on the day to pay payroll or bills or make long-term investments for other investments of the pension fund.
Come back to it might sound a daft question. Do we use the bond markets and things like that, and do we dabble in?
No, only indirectly, I suppose, in that the money market funds that we invest in, they themselves will buy make short-term investments. They're restricted, I think, to an average of a 90-day return on all their investments, so that they can provide instant liquidity to anyone who makes a deposit with them. But we don't directly, no.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, 2 points. First of all, ever since I've been on this committee, we've been holding cash probably at 100% over what the strategic asset allocation is, right? And that's the case at the moment, isn't it?
If you include the short bonds portfolio, the liquidity allocation is higher. Those short bonds are running off, and eventually we'll have used all of that portfolio up. But that's the reason we've been higher in liquidity than the asset allocation. The actual pure cash has been much closer to the asset allocation.
Right. So, are we going to get indicators of cash that reflect the SSA then? SAA rather. Because it's a bit misleading on that case, isn't it?
Sorry, which numbers are you looking at?
Well, I'm looking at your table on page 19.
Is this in this report?
Cash asset. Well, it does mention Aegon short-term bonds, but it's just.
Right.
It's just. I've always felt we're holding quite a lot of cash. Right now, I know markets have been a bit turbulent, and when things are a bit turbulent, I've never known markets not be a bit turbulent. So I'm just wondering whether we're just holding too much cash. That's the first question. right?
Can I just say, thanks,
Yeah.
Graham. It's a great question. I think we should reserve that when we get through to fund management. This is the
Yeah,
report we're
okay.
on now is about a
Okay.
strategy for
Yeah.
doing that kind
And
of
you're going to
treasury
say the same
management.
about my next point, but I'm going to nag because I've realised this is an ocean going liner. Unless I keep nagging and nagging, right, the thing never turns round. So my next bit is performance, and I know this is to do with strategy, but performance indicators as well, because we've been talking about trying to get performance indicators for this particular function and particular comparators. And I know you'll say, oh, well, it's very difficult to get comparators, but local government, right, when it's managing cash, also has comparators. So I don't see why pension funds shouldn't have comparators. Tell me it's irrelevant, fine, but I've made my point.
Yeah, not irrelevant, and I'm sure when we get the next set of figures at the next round of meetings where we look at treasury management performance, you can make those points in another way.
Well, I was rather hoping you'd turn up with the performance indicators rather than me making a point.
They come at it's about timing. We produce those reports at different times during our calendar year,
Okay,
and you've been on here for several years, Graham. You should be aware of that.
I look forward, Chair.
Thank you.
to
It's on the work
performance
programme, I would
indicators.
think, so-
I will bore you until I get them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Point taken. Any more questions or comments, please? I don't think so. So can we move to the vote, please? All in favour of the recommendation? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. Moving on to item number 9 is the Independent Advisor Report. Committee I received the Independent Advisor Report from... I do apologise. I've moved on. Conferences and training, a very important item. Item number 8. Before I hand over to Tamsin to introduce the report, can I move the recommendation on page 41, please, of the agenda pack?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman. Reserve my right to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tamsin, would you take us through a very important conferences and training report?
Thank you, Chair.
Oops.
The Fund is committed to ensuring those charged with decision making and financial management have effective knowledge and skills, and this is achieved through attendance at key conferences and the provision of specific training and information for members. The Good Governance in the LGPS report has recommended new statutory guidance to contain an enhanced requirement for key individuals within the LGPS, including pension committee members, to have knowledge and understanding to carry out their roles effectively, and this may formalise requirements in the near future. The record of core training should be published in the annual report for 22-23. Members are encouraged to attend the free trainings and briefings offered by industry bodies at no charge, and any other internal training provided during the year covering both general pensions matters and any changes in legislation which impact on the work of the committee. Members are encouraged to inform the senior accountant pensions, that's me, when they attend training sessions, so the training record can be updated, please. For the next financial year, the planned conferences are listed in the report. Members will be contacted directly by email about these next week and are encouraged to attend, or offer to attend. I would also like to draw members' attention to the LGPS Central Responsible Investment Summit, which takes place next Thursday, that's 9th of March. This is a Teams event, so members can attend the sessions they're interested in and are available for, even if you can't make the whole day. And please respond to the invitation so that Central send you a link to the meeting and have you on their circulation list for information about the event. For new members of the committee, or those wishing to refresh existing knowledge, the LGPS Fundamentals course is strongly recommended, and it is anticipated that this will be available in physical and virtual format in autumn this year. There is a charge to attend this worthwhile course, so please ensure you are available for the relevant dates before asking me to book places. Officers attend training courses where these are required to ensure they are properly skilled and qualified to fulfil their responsibilities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tamsin, for the report and the availability of all these conferences, training events, etc. And thank you for mentioning next week's LGPS Central one, which is a full day in effect, but split into parts that you can come in and out of that you want to see. Thank you for that. Any questions or comments about training, please? Any members have anything they really feel they want to add to this, or that we can consider for them to improve their training? Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I went on the LAPFA conference in December, and we hear Kieran give his reports and everything else. And this is one of these conferences which is really not a financial conference. It's about the work LAPFA actually does. And to get a better understanding of the background, I sincerely say to members, that is a good one to go on.
Thank you for that, Chris, and for showing how important that can be. Very interesting meeting. Any other questions, comments, please? Yes, Councillor Eddie Beth.
Just to say the fundamentals training was really, really good. However, it was harder to do it online. So I'd say if anyone's going on it, go in person, because online it was quite hard to follow the whole day.
Thank you for that, Councillor Eddie. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I don't see any, so that means that you can all very quickly fill those boxes for Tamsin. I'd like to move to the vote, please, on the recommendation that the report is approved. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you very, very much. Okay, now let's move on to item number 9, the independent advisory report.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Just before I'd like to hand over to you, William, can I just move the recommendation on page 43 of the agenda back?
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry about that. Clearly, since I last reported to this committee in December, and even since the Working Party in January, things are looking considerably better. And at the moment, we're looking at, certainly markets are expecting inflation to come down quite sharply later this year. Growth, where we were expecting a recession, is now looking like probably no recession, if it is very, very small recession. And behind that, so it really lies what central banks have been doing. Some central banks, which were tightening, have stopped tightening, i.e. America. Others have actually gone back to quite significant quantitative easing, i.e. China and Japan in particular, the UK and Europe rather less so. Now, you may not see this, because if you look at interest rates, you may say everybody's still tightening. But actually, while banks are tightening, they've also been expanding their balance sheets at the same time. So that is why we're in a rather better place today than we were a few months ago. Now, not everything is good, and I actually am rather more pessimistic than the market is at the moment. There are two main reasons. One is, and this is getting a little technical, but the US bond yield curve is what's called inverted, i.e. you get more for lending money to the American government for 2 years than you do over 10 years or 30 years. And that's not normal. And it's usually a sign of recession. Not always, but usually. It's a pretty reliable signal that there is going to be a recession at some point. So that's one reason I'm more pessimistic. The second reason is that if we're going back to quantitative easing, and I think we probably are, that has to mean more inflation going forward. So I'm not certain that the market is right, that inflation is going to come down to 2 or 3%. But at my Working Party, I suggested something like a 50% probability of a recession. I think that's come down to something more like 25%. And I suggested about a 10% chance of central banks getting it right. And that's probably gone up to about 20%, 25%. So we're definitely in a better place than we were. What does that mean for the fund? Well, at the moment, we are well diversified. We chose the Working Party not to make any changes to the asset allocation, and I don't actually propose to say anything different today. I think we're in the right kind of place.
Okay, thank you for that update, William. I think part of the problem is, in terms of recession, is sometimes political comments made in public can force countries into recession, and I think we need to be confident that things are working out in the right way rather than talking ourselves down sometimes. I'd like to open it to any questions or comments, please. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. You talked about the bond curve in America. Were you talking because it's short term, it's more profitable than long term investment? Was that because of the back of the American recession or a recession back home here? And also, a second question: I know Europe is countries are on the verge of recession. You know, some of them are, and they're very close to what we are. Does that have a big effect in our markets as well?
Point is, even if we don't get recession, growth is still going to be very, very low. And I had in my working party a kind of very low growth, stagflation kind of scenario. That's still definitely there. So, the fact that we're not getting recession doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get huge growth again. In terms of the economy and markets, there is a link, and it's a very tenuous link. And I would certainly never base an investment on the fact that the economy is getting better or getting worse. It is much more complex than that, I'm afraid. I didn't quite get your first part of your question. Did I answer it? So I'm very deaf, I'm afraid.
Well, talk about recession. You said about the American bond market was an indication of recession. Was an indication of recession for us, or was it an indication of recession in America? That was all.
Well, America tends to drive the world because it is so much the biggest economy in the world. So if the US has a recession, if it catches if it sneezes, we're probably going to catch a cold too, I'm afraid.
Any other questions, comments, please?
Yeah, I'm interested in the quantitative easing.
My
Right, at the moment we're going in the opposite direction, quantitative easing. People are, So are you assuming that in the States or here we will move back into quantitative easing? Right, we'll move back towards quantitative easing. Because I know you mentioned China, and I can understand why China, because where they've been with COVID. Right, are you assuming that will happen in the West?
I think it's a very much higher chance today that is what's going to happen. Although the US hasn't really started expanding its balance sheet, it has certainly stopped tightening. I've got various technical reasons for believing they will start quantitative easing going forward. So the answer to that is very much yes.
And what about here?
We will end up following what the US does.
But I think the key point from William's comments and the questions is that is our asset allocation in the right place to reduce risk? Could any of those scenarios move? So we're trying to reduce the risk of to our fund.
Chair, I think if I'm right, I can always be wrong, so I'm not guaranteed to be right. But if I'm right that we're going back to a rather looser monetary policy, but at the same time probably higher interest rates, the risk has to be inflation. And I'm also aware that more spending is being done by governments compared to the private sector than it was, say, 10 years ago. And governments are less price conscious, and therefore their spending tends to be more inflationary. So I think the risk is, yet again, that inflation does not come down as markets are hoping. But we have spent a lot of time talking about it. We have a big weighting towards inflation protecting mitigating assets, and it kind of comes back to index-linked gilts. Another reason why I'm quite keen to start a weighting in that area.
Thank you, William, for that clarification. Any other questions, comments, please? I don't see any, so can we move to the vote, please? All in favour of the recommendation? And again, that is unanimous. Thank you very, very much. Moving on to item number 10 is the work programme. The recommendation for the work programme is on page 48 of the agenda pack, so I'll move that.
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Tamsin, would you take us through the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. In the appendix, you can see the work programme for the rest of the committee meetings of the current cycle. The committee is asked to identify any additional reports required. Thank you, Chair.
Short, sharp, sweet, concise. Thank you, Tamsin. We've all seen the report. It's very clear where we are over the next few months. Indeed, for longer, there are some things to be picked up later that we will place when we have better information. So, any questions or comments, please? Yes, Chris King.
Thank you, Chair. It's just about the review of the work of the Pension Fund Committee and Pension Board. This has been to be placed for quite a while now, and I thought the understanding was in the autumn we were going to get something come back. but they're saying that you're saying the review commenced during the autumn. I thought the review had commenced well before that. Could you help us out at all?
My understanding, and we haven't got the right officers necessarily here to be able to explain it in fully, is that we're expecting guidance to change in government guidance on pension fund committees, all that kind of stuff. So we're really looking to see if that has an impact on what they're doing, and they have been busy doing other stuff in terms of cabinets and committees and etc. So I can get, if you like, I think best thing is for me to send something to members by email afterwards.
If you like. Yeah, my understanding, Chris, is that we're waiting for the consultation to come out from central government, and there's been delays, obviously, in that consultation. So it's a bit odd for us to go ahead of the consultation come up because we're second guessing what that consultation was going to be.
Thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you. Where are we? Okay, so with no other comments, can we move to the vote? Do we approve the work programme? All those in favour? That's again unanimous. Thank you very much. Item number 11 is fund valuation and performance. And again, before I hand over to Tamsin, page 58 has the recommendation, so I will move that.
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Tamsin, would you like to take us through your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report is to inform the Nottinghamshire Pension Fund Committee on the value of the pension fund at the end of the latest quarter and provide information on the performance of the fund. It's a detailed report, but as we have such a full agenda, I'll focus on the key elements. The table in paragraph 3 shows the valuation at the end of December, at the end of September, and the value a year ago. The fund investments have increased by 155.6 million, which is 2.5%, since the previous quarter, recovering the reductions in the previous quarter following the market turmoil in September, but still showing a reduction of 4.3%, which is 287 million over the last 12 months. Within this valuation is 485 million of infrastructure investments, amounting to 7.7% of the fund. 9.8% of the fund is now committed to infrastructure investments. Paragraph 6 shows a more detailed analysis of valuations by portfolio, and paragraph 8 shows the figures for the first 9 months of 22-23 and the unaudited fund account for the last year. Paragraphs 9 to 20 relate to the fund's investments in fossil fuel companies and investments in sustainable equities and renewable energy. The core index portfolio section reflects the equity market movements over the last quarter. The Schroders portfolio shows the regional analysis of holdings and purchases and sales during the period. The LGPS Central portfolio shows further capital calls on the infrastructure fund, and Aberdeen have continued to manage our property portfolio. The Specialist portfolio section shows the composition and valuation of the Specialist portfolio and the transactions during the quarter. The section on responsible investment activity summarises some of the responsible investment activity which has taken place during the quarter on behalf of the fund. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tamsin. Obviously, we've got the exempt report to follow this, and presentations from Aberdeen and Schroders where we can ask more detailed questions. At this stage, does anybody have any questions or comments for Tamsin, please? Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 3 of the report, point 10, and it shows the quarters of how much you have in fossil fuels and sustainable renewables, etc. On the paragraph of point 10, in the final sentence, it says prices are highly correlated to the oil price. Would you say that we've got quite a heavy weighting now to various energy stocks, and perhaps we should put those investments elsewhere if oil prices are going to go down?
Tamsin.
Thank you, Chair. I think it depends which bits you're looking at as to what the response to that is. The Schroders Schroders make their own decisions over what they invest in, so you can direct that question to them when they come in to present later. Pretty much all of the other fossil fuel investments are held within our passive portfolio. So the only way we can change that is if we come out of those funds and choose a different type of fund. We like those funds because they provide exposure to the market as a whole, and they're quite a good hedge against active positions and our very pro-transition investments that we've made in a lot of our infrastructure, which is highly weighted towards sustainable and renewable energy. So the markets as a whole are quite a good hedge against that if it turns out we're more optimistic on the transition. So I don't think I would agree with you that we should be selling on the bits that we have control over, because I think the consequences of those decisions on the fund as a whole would be significant. But do feel free to ask the question of Schroders when they come in later.
And just to add to that, the market investment, the passives, for example, are invested in to reflect the market, but also at a very low cost. So the net returns are high for those investments. I think it's very important to understand that and the risk of moving away. Okay, Councillor Chapman, Graham. Wait, Councillor Chapman, have your microphone.
I gather from point 4 that there is some attempt to reduce liquidity and cash. Right, that's number 1. Number 2, I'm doing this from memory, but somewhere in the paper I thought I read that we're struggling to find placement for infrastructure investment. Is that the case? No. Right, so we're not having difficulty in fulfilling our quota. No. Okay, so I must have imagined it. Right, that's fine. That's that out of the way. And third, just on Hermes, right? I think I've raised this point before. If we are to agree to that very well expressed strategy on investment that we had in the earlier paper, then what is absolutely critical, if we're not going to disengage, that we know exactly where we're voting and how we're voting, right, and where we're putting pressure on. And the thing about the Hermes information that's indicated in this report is when you look at it, all it does is tell you where they voted against. They don't tell you what the reasoning is. So it doesn't tell us that, for example, we're putting particular pressure on BP or putting particular pressure on Glencore for particular reasons, because the reasons could well be to do with payment to chief executives. So what I think is really important that we do know where we're putting pressure, and that the Hermes report is a way that we know where we're putting pressure through our voting capacity. So I'm just looking to see whether we can't get a more nuanced report from Hermes on why they're voting against a particular thing.
Right. Can I just come in on that one? The proxy voting papers in April, so we'll see a full. So we will look to see if we can improve the report based on what you've just requested.
And that is why I'm flagging it up now, because I say if you don't keep pounding away at stuff doesn't happen. All right. What? Okay.
Tamsin, would you like to answer the other 2 questions, please?
On the cash balances, if you're talking about the liquidity allocation, that is a combination of our cash balances and our short bonds portfolio. The short bonds portfolio is running down naturally. That was what it was designed to do, and it's set up with lots of individual corporate bonds with close maturity dates. And when those get repaid, the money comes back to the fund. It was set up originally, and it has to a large extent met the purpose it was set up for. It was set up to spread that money come back to the fund in chunks to try and match our commitments to private assets, because you make a commitment to a fund and then it can be some time before that commitment is actually called. We continue to have significant uncalled commitments to private asset funds, and that is one of the reasons why we need to keep relatively high cash balances, because we're never quite sure when those calls are going to come in. They can be significant and they can come in at fairly short notice. I think we paid over 30 million plus into Central's private asset funds between Christmas and New Year. So we do need to keep fairly high cash balances to meet those calls. We also have an allocation to cash within our investment allocation, and there have been times over the last year, as assets values have fallen, that being overweight in cash has been beneficial to the fund. We also have a big chunk of cash standing at around about 50 million. It varies a lot, which is allocated to the Schroders portfolio, and they can call on that at any time, and that's based on their view of where they think there are opportunities in the market.
So how does that relate to our SA, or whatever it is, SAA, the strategic asset allocation? Because how does that relate to the strategic asset allocation? Because you seem to be justifying a constantly exceeding it.
The reason we're exceeding, if you look at the asset allocation, you'll see that there's a range on all of the percentages, and the range on cash is partly because at the moment we have that short bonds, which is there for liquidity purposes, even though it's not actually it's not cash. So that's why that's high at the moment, which is a temporary thing. And I would say that on the whole, if you're just considering the cash balance, that has been quite close to the 2% allocation that we have in our strategic asset allocation.
Okay, fine, thanks.
Thank you, Tamsin, for that very detailed response. And so that's really the difference between the overnight money markets and shorter term liquidity needs for what we're doing in the fund. Any other questions, comments, please? Councillor Trainer.
Yes, thank you. Can I just ask, we've now got the information that tells us what the percentage of the fund is with regard to total fossil fuels. How much of that rise is actually asset valuation rather than an absolute increase in stocks, please?
Slightly. Right. So it's a combination of two things. One is that as oil prices go up, the value of, for example, Shell and BP within the indexes that we hold in our passive funds increases as a proportion of the market cap as a whole. Within the Schroders, and that's within our passive, that's the whole story in the recent past, because we've not made any movements on that, I don't think, within the last year on our passive. Within Schroders, obviously the investment managers will make decisions based on where they think growth is going to occur, because they're there to try and make returns for the fund, and they will make those decisions based on the opportunities as they see them in the market. And we have not asked them to take into account their weighting in fossil fuel as such. What we do ask them to do is consider the long-term risks to the fund, and you will see if you look at the actual holdings within the Schroders portfolio that the fossil fuel companies that they invest tend to be those with a better transition plan, more investments in renewable energy, And I think one of the things to be aware of, and it is one of the, if you read the small print in my report, one of the caveats with looking at this is that a lot of the fossil fuel companies are also where a lot of the investments are taking place in renewable energy, which is not featuring at all in our total of sustainable and renewable investments. But it can make up a significant proportion of some of the funds. And I know some of the Schroders ones, they're looking at increasingly biofuels for aviation and many of the other investments that are going to further the transition.
Yeah, thank you. I'm well aware that companies like BP are among the largest, if not the largest, investors in renewable energy in the UK. I'd just like to also just note that that figure of increase in total fossil fuel, which may be almost entirely due to the value of the stocks, is 32%. And I just congratulate and point out the increase in sustainable and renewable funds, which has increased over the last year 267%. I think that's worthy of note and well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Trona. Comment well made. Any other questions or comments, please? Okay, so we'll move to the vote. All in favour of the recommendation? Any against? Any abstentions? One abstention. It's carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 12. This is where we move to the part of the agenda that proposes we're meeting closed session to consider the exempt information in agenda items 13 and 14. I therefore invite the committee to resolve that the public be excluded for the remainder of the meeting on the grounds that discussions are likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information as described in the Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing that information. So I'll move that. Ask for a seconder, please.
Yeah, second that, Mr. Chairman.
I'll move that to the vote. All in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, and we'll close the open meeting. Thank you.